Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Birthplace of Country Music Museum tonight. We're so glad to see you here. This is going to be a really interesting evening. We have four extraordinary women with us here tonight to talk about music as work. And this is complementary programming to go along with our current special exhibit, I've Endured Women in Old Time Music. And I know some of you have been in there visiting that before tonight, before the program. If you didn't get a chance to do that, do come back and see it. It is well worth it. And several of the women in front here are featured in the exhibit. I'm Renee Rogers. I'm the head curator here at the Birthplace of Country Music Museum. My colleague, Tony Doman, is in the back doing all the cool tech stuff. And we are very excited to be hosting this evening's discussion. We have four female musicians here who also are intersecting with music as work in various other ways. And we'll jump into that discussion in a minute. But first, I just have a few housekeeping details for you all to be aware of. For those of you on Zoom, because we do have a Zoom audience with our in-person audience, please be sure and keep your video and your microphone turned off. That will make it an optimal experience for everyone on the Zoom end. We will be having a chance for audience Q&A at the end. Anyone in the audience who wants to ask a question, you'll get a chance to do that. But if you are on Zoom and you have a question, please just put your question in the chat and Tony will help facilitate that so that your question gets answered. We will send a survey out after this to get your feedback on your experience. So keeping a lookout for that. It's usually only a 2 or 3 minute survey, but it always helps us to improve our programming. And then finally, please consider sharing a donation after tonight's program. Tony will put a link in the chat for those on Zoom, but we will also have a little donation jar over there. This is free programming. Most of the programming that we do is free or low cost, so that it can be as open and accessible as possible to our community. So any donations help us to continue to make those programs accessible in that way. And finally, I want to give you just an idea of what to expect, and then I'll do a short introduction before we jump straight in. We're going to have a sort of discussion with the four women before you. They are then at the end going to do a little bit of music and performance and demo for you, including some dancing. So you'll get a little bit of an idea of what they do professionally after you've heard about it. And then, of course, we'll have that Q&A. But first, let me introduce our four panelists. First, we have Carla Gover on this end. She's an 8th generation Kentuckian whose art and work celebrates the best of what the state has to offer. She shares flatfooting, ballads, and banjo through her performances, recordings, collaborations, and online courses. She's released 7 albums of music and toured for nearly 3 decades, playing such venues as the Glasgow Royal Hall, Merle Fest, and the Kennedy Center. She was recognized as a master dancer by the Kentucky Folklife Program and recently won the Appy for Best Dance Educator from the Appalachian Arts and Entertainment Awards. She is the founder of the groundbreaking online Appalachian Flatfooting and Clogging Academy. And with her partner, Yanni Vozos, she also coordinates the Cornbread and Tortillas Artist Collective, whose mission is to build community by sharing art, music, dance, and cultural heritage. To her right, we have, oops, let me get the right card. To her right, we have Emily Spencer. She has played and taught music for a good portion of her life. She graduated from UVA-Wise in 1975 with a BS in social welfare and completed her education requirements to become certified in K-12 music from there many years later. She met her late husband, Thornton Spencer, in 1975, and they soon formed the White Top Mountain Band, along with the renowned fiddler, Albert Hash. The band continues to perform together to this day. In 1980, she began teaching mountain music in a community music program at the Mount Rogers Fire Department, and this program eventually became the Albert Hash Memorial Band Program in Grayson County Schools. She is currently an instructor in both the Ash and Allegheny Jam programs, that's the Junior Appalachian Musicians programs in North Carolina, and has also taught through Wilkes Community College in Ash, Allegheny, and Wilkes, and at Wytheville Community College. Emily has also led many workshops at various festivals and events. To her right, we have one of our homegrown favorites, Currently based in Bristol, Virginia, Tennessee, and originally from the Pines of North Carolina, Ella Patrick is a singer-songwriter. She's also known as Mama Molasses. She's one of our Radio Bristol DJs, and she is also a production assistant here at Radio Bristol. Growing up with a deep love of music, Ella began playing stringed instruments at an early age while singing gospel music in church and learning folk ballads from her parents' dusty late 1960s record collection. While in college at Warren Wilson, just outside of Asheville, North Carolina, Ella became greatly influenced by Appalachian folk music and took classes in old-time murder ballad singing and bluegrass music. Patrick has since decided, or Ella has since decided, to cook up some songs of her own with a recipe consisting of equal parts Southern Appalachia, 1940s country swing, and 1960s folk revival. And her radio show is called Folk Yeah, so if you haven't listened to it, you definitely need to tune into that. She has 2 years of touring under her belt and a self-released EP to her name. And then finally, at the end, we have Dr. Dena Jennings. Dena is a physician and artist in Central Virginia who can trace her ancestry in Appalachia back 5 generations through her mother's family. 20 years after establishing her medical practice in Amani Works, a nonprofit organization for conflict transformation and human rights advocacy, Dena moved to Ontario, Canada, where she entered a 4-year arts apprenticeship. There she learned to hand-carve modern instruments made from gourds and other natural fibers in the style of traditional instruments from around the world. At the end of her apprenticeship, she opened a workshop, studio, and retail music store in a small town in central Ontario. She now lives and works in Central Virginia, hosting instrument building workshops, conflict transformation retreats, and the Appalachian on-time music gathering at her farm. So as you can see, we have a great diversity of different sort of outlets into music, and we're going to hear more about that now. But first, I'm just going to throw out a question to the whole panel, which is just to tell us a little bit more about how your work intersects with music and how you actually came to be in music as your career, as the foundation of what you do on a daily basis.
Okay, I guess we're going down the line. Well, I feel like maybe some of it was touched on in my bio, so try to be succinct. But growing up in Eastern Kentucky, I grew up right over the mountain from Pound, Virginia, in Letcher County, Whitesburg. And there's just a ton of music all around me, music in the churches, music in the schoolhouses, square dances, and especially my family. My grandmother was a great singer. My grandfather was too. I have 30 first cousins and 22 aunts and uncles. And so big musical family. And I was always in love with music and dance. And I knew that that's what I wanted to do. I majored in music at UK, and then I just went straight into touring full time, and I have done so ever since. And, you know, as a kid growing up playing music, you know, with my grandmother, it was not something she would ever consider as a career, although my grandparents didn't really have jobs or use much money because they just lived, you know, back in a holler and raised most of what they had. So for me, I never could have predicted the journey of what being a professional musician was going to be like. And I know for Ella here, it's going to look real different as the years roll on, as it has for me. But for me, what it has been is just a lot of different festivals, a lot of different educational, you know, arts and education, community events. And then eventually I've performed a lot as a dancer, but begun as the years have gone by to teach that a lot more and to start the online academy, because it's something that's kind of in danger of disappearing. So it's just, you do a lot of things, you wear a lot of hats, you juggle a lot of balls, and you work really hard, but it's also a really huge blessing to be able to do something that you really truly are passionate about, and to be from a culture that you're carrying on, and in my case, hopefully expanding our vision of what it means to be Appalachian and making that a more diverse cultural space and more inclusive space. So that's my journey.
Hey, y'all. I guess I had a little bit of a different journey. I was born up in Northern Virginia, believe it or not, Arlington, Virginia, but I think I was born to play music. It was something I always was drawn to music. as a child and started learning to play at a pretty young age, fiddle and ukulele, guitar, those things probably by 6th and 7th grade. And I always knew I wanted to do music. And I loved to fiddle, and it was just something I was drawn to. So about as soon as I got old enough to leave, because I always loved the mountains, I guess some of it was in my roots, I ended up at Clinch Valley College, right? And came down here because I knew this was where the music was, and that's where I wanted to be, where the source was. And I've been here 50 years, I guess, now playing music, and met up with my husband, my late husband, Thornton, and all of his family, who my brother-in-law, Albert Hash, made instruments. His daughter's Audrey is featured out here in the museum that made instruments, and just fell into that wonderful musical family. And somehow we all fell into teaching kind of by accident. And it ended up being a very big part of my life, teaching in the schools and in the community programs and playing in a band where, I mean, a lot of times we're busy 6-7 days a week. So it's been kind of a challenge sometimes. I guess anyone could almost burn out, but you feel like you're doing something good for the world by passing on the music and making people feel better about themselves. And, you know, we get, like when we had adults, they'd say, well, it kind of missed a generation and I wished I'd learned to play from, you know, my dad or something like that. So you feel like you're helping bring people to their roots and helping kids feel better about themselves. And then as a performer, which we've played all over the place and in different countries, and did the Crooked Road tours that went around on the West Coast and East Coast, but you feel like you're bringing joy to people. And it does, you know, just by playing, it brings them a lot of joy in many ways. Okay. Here, Miss Ella. Whoops, you don't need that, do you?
This one's working. I'm nervous. Okay. So I grew up playing music, and similar to you, just was always drawn to it. My mother has a beautiful voice, alto voice. She can sing harmony to anything. And she grew up going to a primitive Baptist church with her grandparents and did a lot of the old singing without music kind of deal. So I was just always obsessed with it. I would cry if she didn't sing me to sleep when I was a kid. And I grew up playing in church a bunch. Our church had a bluegrass band, and I was enamored with that. And I wanted to play stringed instruments, which was slightly frowned upon because, you know, the devil's instrument and stuff. So I grew up playing fiddle and viola in school. And yeah, I was just always drawn to it. My uncle is obsessed with old country music. He loves the Carter family. So that was some of the first songs I ever learned, the Wildwood Flower and stuff like that. And yeah, so just rolled on with it. Never considered that I'd be doing it as a career at all. I just grew up playing on the porch and hanging out and stuff. And then I went to school at Warren Wilson and got in with their old time program and sort of studied, but also just like hung out and played music real late at night. And then I kept trying to get real jobs after I got out of school, and my parents did not want me to necessarily be a singer, but I was kind of a child of the brew scene, which I think a lot of people coming up, you know, in North Carolina, Virginia, Tennessee, the breweries are huge. And they all need somebody to sit in a corner and play an acoustic guitar for a few hours. So I honestly was working in a head shop, and I was trying, and I started going to open mics, and I'd played fiddle in a bunch of bands before that, but people started booking me for gigs, and if you can make $200 in a couple hours, that's pretty good. So it's become what I do and predominantly how I make money. So it really is work. And now I have the honor to work here at the museum and do my best to do anything that they tell me to do and try to do a good job. So thank y'all for having me.
Well, I love that we have similar stories here. I started singing and playing a tambourine before I could walk well, because I grew up in a church that, Pentecostal church. My family was from Eastern Kentucky, Hollers, and you had 4 hours of church Sunday morning, 4 hours of church Sunday night, 4 hours of church Tuesday night, and 4 hours of church Thursday night. And sometimes you'd have a youth night on Friday. So you got to play music. That was the best part of church. The preaching was fine, but the best part was that you just heard music nonstop all day long. And we didn't have bulletins or things that said, okay, now we're going to sing hymn, blah, 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 from whatever page. Whoever jumped up and started a song, that's what everybody sang, whether they sang it well or whether they sang it right. You just hung on and went with it. And I always wondered why, my family's moved to Akron, Ohio during the Great Migration. If you know anything about that, that's when a lot of Blacks from the South moved north, and they say it was a lot for jobs, but we're finding out more. It was one of the greatest migrations from people escaping terror in their neighborhoods and in their farms and families. Well, my family was one of those. After a cousin was murdered, moved north. And it seemed like that whole holler, finding out that there were good jobs up north, kind of unscrewed from Eastern Kentucky like a light bulb and screwed into Akron, Ohio. Church all week long. You could only go over other church members' families' houses to hang out. You didn't fraternize with anybody else. You just didn't. And so I always wondered, why did our music sound more like Roy Clark than Mahalia Jackson? It didn't make sense, but there it was, from a very little kid at your mom's knee, you learned all those songs. And now that I've been studying about it a little more, we're now up to 8 generations we can count back in Appalachia. The more I study about it, there's a book called Slave Songs of the United States. And when you look back to the region of Kentucky and Tennessee that my family's from, a lot of those songs back to like 1820s, 1810s are those same songs we were singing every Sunday. So it's just amazing that that thread of music goes not just through my family, but through the region of Appalachia that my family's from. So.
Yeah, like you said, I do really like how there's a thread that's running through all 4 of you about the beginnings of music in your lives. And Dena, I wanted to ask you a specific question, because you are balancing the music, but you're also a physician, and you run a conflict transformation and relationship sort of building workshops. How do you find, how do you merge medicine and music? Because music has a lot to do with well-being and self-care. Do they connect those 2 career paths?
How often do you listen to a song and it goes right to your heart and suddenly you feel better? Whatever heaviness you started with before that song, when you're done, you feel better. Can you honestly say you feel that good walking out of your doctor's office? I hope you do for your patient of mine, because that's my goal in the doctor's office too, is that you get that same, oh, that same feeling. And the same way with conflict transformation, when you find out, we talk about transformation rather than resolution or management. I mean, who wants to manage a conflict? You want to change it, right? And who wants to resolve something that's generations old? You might want to, but you're not going to do that in a workshop. So we talk about transformation, changing it to that next phase so that it can continue to change and change. And hopefully when you see that there's a way out of that conflict, you get that same feeling after you hear a great ballad or after you hear a song that really touches your heart. So that's how they connect for me.
So a lot of musicians' lives are balancing multiple sort of strands of making a living, having to manage yourself a lot, having to manage your own career a lot. It's entrepreneur, it's being an MBA almost, all these different things, but it's also so much about the creativity. So I'm wondering from all of you, how do you balance that exploration and expression of that creativity with the day-to-day realities of making a career out of your music? Because sometimes they're very stark differences, I would say. And maybe I'm wrong because I'm not a musician.
I'll go first on this one because I'm really passionate about the fact that, and this is common across like musicians, artists, visual artists, even like healers or spiritual people that are trying to have a business doing something that's inherently pretty creative. And you hear the refrain, I wish I didn't have to do all the business stuff. I wish I could just do the creative stuff. And I used to feel that way. And I think what happened over the years is like, it's kind of, I realized it was partially just the price that you pay. If you want to be creative, you want to live a creative life, you want to make your art, you have to learn a skill set that maybe you didn't count on having to learn when you first started out. But you can also embrace it and let it be fun and let it be part of your creativity. So like, that was one of the things that I'd already was okay at it, but during the pandemic really leaned into my Instagram account and like social media and writing newsletters. I have the most fun with my email newsletters. And those are things, I started an email list in like 1997, really early on, and I've been rabid about it. And I have 4,000 people on my email list, which isn't huge, but it's like people that I've really collected. And it's enabled me to have a sustainable lifelong career because those are people that I have relationships with. I answer them. I know their names. I know sometimes their birthdays or their dogs' names, and we were crowdfunding with that mailing list in our band way before that was even a thing. So I feel like, yes, you have to still carve out time to actually sit down and write songs and not just make social media posts or write emails. But to me, letting that be a part of your creativity and part of your self-expression, it changes it from this onerous, awful thing that you don't want to do to this thing that you get to do because you get to be a creative musician for a living. So it's kind of a shift in perspective, but it legitimately is fun. I truly do enjoy it. So I think that's my take on it. That's my workaround.
Yay. That's a tough one. I don't know if I've achieved a balance yet. But I know doing a lot of teaching and so on, and having to go back to school to be a certified teacher, you get to learn about a lot of different things. You learn as you teach how to teach better. So you're growing as you're teaching other people and learning even from students that can play two notes sometimes. So it's kind of a process with the teaching all along and learning different instruments so you can help students better. I've really gotten a lot more teaching than what I ever thought I would be into. I was expected more to be into the performing. So really the teaching is taken a bigger part of my life. And you do have to continue to grow and think of how you can do things in a better way. Same thing as a performer, adding new material or finding different ways to reach your audience. And like you said, some of the newer things we have to do with social media and things like that. So you do naturally kind of continue to grow, but it is hard to achieve a balance sometimes, I feel like.
Yeah, I really struggle with the
If you could see my house.
yeah, I really struggle with the balance, and I have artist brain like pretty bad. But I've been really lucky to have people that have helped me. I have a manager, the part-time manager that helps me a lot with contracts and things like that I do really struggle with. Because I have dyslexia, and I'm also a visual artist. I unfortunately have an art degree, and so it really is the artist's brain. But in some ways, that's a good thing, because I think when you look at creating art or music like as a holistic kind of process, it helps the work become art. And I really enjoyed taking selfies and just making weird Instagram posts and stuff like that. I've never been good about an email list. I really should. I probably would do better on my GoFundMe, but I did do a GoFundMe when my car broke down the first time, and raised like $3,000 in 2 days, and recognized that I had a bigger community than I thought I did online. But yeah, I like started and just like made an Instagram account and started posting like weird pictures and stuff, and people started booking me, and I don't know, it's a struggle. I think for most artists, everything's in my phone too, like my whole schedule and everything like that. And I forget sometimes what date I'm going to be where and what I'm doing when. But I think that's just a part of the process of it. And I'm grateful to be able to do it. And sometimes I do mess up and double book, and but generally I show up on time and do what I'm supposed to do. Try to.
Yeah, I don't know where we would be without the phones and the alarms and them to remind us to do things, but I had the advantage of having a mom who was a banker and a father who worked for Goodyear International in the rubber capital of the world. I didn't have much choice but to do business well. And when I told him I wanted to be a scientist, didn't matter if it was going to be a doctor. I was the first one in the family to want to do something other than a business related thing. They just really barked at me a lot the whole way as I was opening my practice, because I had a solo practice. So mostly I heard, "Are you nuts? Do you really think you can do that?" It's like, yeah. And I had enough "are you nuts" questions that I decided really what I was looking at was social change. And so my mom said one day, "Why don't you just open a nonprofit and run everything through your nonprofit?" And so that's what I did. I opened in 96, I opened a nonprofit for human rights. And so one of the rights, there are 30 of them. One of them is the right to play, and the other is your right to your culture. And so everything musical, I run through those portions of the human rights organization. We're now a consultative status with the United Nations. We have workshops that we run, and everything goes through the nonprofit. So if I can think it and it sounds like fun, it's going through the nonprofit. And by doing that, you can accept donations. So there are ways that, creative ways I had to come up with making lumberjacks and making money off of it, because it's part of culture. So that's probably the thing that saved me the most and allowed me to do the art and the cultural thing.
Back to you for just a second because of the radio connection, because not only are you a musician, but like I said, you're working here at the museum as a production assistant, and you have your own radio show. And radio is a big part of the early commercial country old time blues, all sorts of different types of music found their way onto the radio in those early days. How do you use your Radio Bristol show to sort of express your own creativity, but how do you also use it to support other artists?
So I stumbled into working at Radio Bristol a few years ago. I was traveling around in my Ford Windstar, playing at a bunch of breweries, and came and played. Chris hit me up on Instagram. I was hanging out in Rural Retreat, working on a farm up there. But anyways, and he asked me if I wanted to do a radio program. And I was like, I've never, ever thought of doing anything like that or have any whatever. But I was like, well, why not? Let's try it. Let's see how it goes. And working at Radio Bristol has taught me so much. One of the things that I've been real inspired about working at Radio Bristol and understanding, which like hit me one day, is that it's a living exhibit. And it is actually a part of this museum physically, but it's an exhibit that is sharing and educating folks about the roots of American music. And the program that I do is kind of free form in a lot of ways, but also has a lot of connections to history and stuff like that. And it is about connecting rural, Southern music with the folk revival of the 1960s, and kind of looking at the cultural exchange between North and South, or rural and urban, or whatever you want to say. And I think it's infinitely fascinating. And I'm always finding new artists that did things and are doing things and are inspired by, either cultures they grew up in or cultures that they learned about. I love like the Laurel Canyon scene of California and people out there, being into country music and recognizing that this music really is for everyone. And I've been real lucky also to have that radio program to uplift other artists, and being a working musician. And I kind of run around like North Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, and South Carolina a bunch. People that I meet on the road and stuff, I've gotten to get their music here. I was listening to a buddy of mine, Colin Cutler, which, by the way, he has a GoFundMe right now, if you'd like to donate. And anyways, they were playing one of his songs on the radio this week, and he got to play at Merle Fest. So it's like making those connections with artists that are working and allowing them a platform on the radio, which I feel like they probably wouldn't necessarily have otherwise, or like have a connection to the history of the radio. I mean, I think NPR radio programs do a lot, but I think what Radio Bristol does is I don't want to say deeper, but it is in connecting artists to the past and to history. And so I get to have people on my show and get to play their music and share their music. And it means a lot to me because I'm on a journey, an unending journey.
I'll hand it back. That's awesome. So another question for all of you is, within your work, what's one of the things that's been most difficult, but also one of the things that you like most about what you're doing as musicians and as working in music?
I'll tell you. I got our most difficult. Does anybody in here know what an ipu heke is? Ipu heke? Has anybody heard of that? Yeah, I hadn't either. And somebody asked me to build them one. And I said, okay, I'll look into it, research it, see what it is. And I started building it. And I was if I can be proud, I was proud of the product that I made. It's beautiful. It's a gourd-based drum with a gourd top. They're joined together and it's used in Hawaiian music and dance. So like when you see the Hawaiian hula and they're bouncing this thing on the ground and smacking it with their hand, that's what an ipu heke is. I didn't get a deposit. So I am the proud owner of an ipu heke for the past, 12 years now? Nobody wants it. I like it, but I would much rather have been paid for it. When it came time for the guy to buy it, he says, oh, I found another person out here to get one and blah, blah. And so now I haven't, anybody want an ipu heke, I'm happy to sell it. So I learned from that, get a deposit, get a non-refundable deposit that's significant enough that people aren't going to take off after you go through the love and the care to grow the gourd. And now we mill our own wood. So growing the gourd, milling the wood on the farm, waiting for it to dry, getting everything together for somebody to walk off. So that's one of the things that's been frustrating, but one of the things that I love the most is now everything comes off of our farm in Central Virginia, except for the skins and the strings. And that's the only thing that's not coming from the farm.
I have a thought about probably the most difficult thing across the arc of my career is I have 3 children and 2 of them are out of the house now. And my youngest is 11 and being a touring musician for that long and dealing with homeschool and childcare and getting my mom or getting my big brother who doesn't have kids of his own, or just that has been a juggling act and it's been really hard and it's taken a lot of like focus and determination. The kids are all great musicians, so that's a good part of it. But that's been a tricky part, but also just navigating like the whole kind of retirement and health insurance when you're self-employed, not just for musicians, but self-employed people. All I can say, I know that Obamacare wasn't great for everybody, but thank God for Obamacare because I have health insurance and I've worked hard my whole life, but I just didn't have it until I was in my 30s because that's when Obamacare came out, you know. So that's huge. And just like, I wish we had better systems in our country to help take care of people that are working hard, but that are self-employed and don't fit the traditional 401k benefits. You know, I started my own Roth IRA, but still, you know, I've been doing this for 30 years, arts in the schools. My retirement's not what it would be if I'd worked a, you know, traditional job. And, you know, I made that choice, but I wish there were better choices for us. So, yeah.
I think achieving a work-life balance, like you said, raising kids. I've raised 2 kids. They're all grown up and musicians on their own and play with us now, but that was hard when they were little. Sometimes you miss things because you had to go somewhere and play, you know, and things like that. And still it's sort of hard. Sometimes anyone else have a hard time saying no to stuff, you know, so you can kind of get overwhelmed. I think that's one thing that's a little hard. Fortunately, I did get in the school system and I'm so thankful because, gosh, I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't gotten in the school system and getting a little bit of retirement and some health insurance. But I did get on Obamacare when I retired a little early. But I guess being in the school system, I know there's some teachers out there. It can be kind of challenging, can't it, in itself? It can be challenging, but it's a good challenge and sometimes it's a crazy one. It's always a crazy one. Chaos always ruled in my music classroom, but yeah.
I hope it's okay to talk about this, and I hope I don't get in trouble. One of the things I don't like, besides just emails, about music is being a woman out there. I've had somebody call me, a booker last week, asking to see my OnlyFans. And I get constant messages from people I don't know asking for stuff. I won't say I've been tipped in condoms. I've had people try to abduct me at a gas station one time. I've had people grab me on stage and try and make out with me. I've had people grab me other places on stage. I have had people stalk me. I've had a couple of experiences with it. I actually had to get a protective order against someone who was stalking me. And I also, last year, I had another person stalk me, which is one of the reasons I generally don't say my last name, but they got my phone number and were asking for some favors that they wanted to pay for, and got my friend's number and started getting mad and fat shaming me because I didn't want to do the things that they wanted me to do. And I've been publicly fat shamed on the internet multiple times, shared with big accounts for being like a plus size woman that put myself out there. Yeah, lots of stuff like that. I do travel with pepper spray. I've had people get into my car when I was loading up and try to grab me. Just a lot of stuff like that when you're out late playing music and people think that it's okay to do that kind of thing. And I think, you know, women a lot of times with the objectification of our bodies experience that. And that is a thing for me that has scared me. And I've been in situations where I've been waiting for people to come shoot me before because of it. So lots of, I know that's heavy, but it's what happened. The first time I played rhythm and roots, I was waiting for my stalker to come shoot me. And it was very intense. I don't normally like speak about it, but anyways, just sharing that. And that is very much a thing. And I think a lot of ladies that put themselves out there experience that. I've talked to other singers that have had similar experiences, and people, you know, wanting to pay them for certain services and all these things. That being said, one of my favorite things about playing music is the deep way that it does touch people's psyches. And this is really heavy too, but a couple weeks ago, a good friend of mine, her baby passed away. He had type 1 diabetes and they didn't know, and he had severe ketoacidosis. And I played his funeral. And the first album I put out, actually, I put out from money that I got from singing at a funeral. One of my best friends passed away. They got into a car accident, and somebody had heard about it and asked me to come sing. And it's really intense to be in those situations. And people are like, you know, how do you do that? But it's like, we think of music as this thing like that's fun and entertaining, and it is. But it also touches this deep part of our spiritual selves. And I've gotten to be in situations where I've sang over the bodies of people that have passed away, like physically with families, and, you know, sang funerals, baby funerals. And it is, I don't think that space isn't something that, you know, everyone gets to feel. And it feels like a healing space, like what you're talking about, like that people have that moment that they can cry and stuff. So both heavy things, but, and I hope it's okay that I talked about those things, but yeah.
I just wanted to thank Ella for being that transparent with us, because we can't talk about women in music and not talk about the things that she mentioned. It's real it's something that happens for many of us in various forms and ways. So thanks for being transparent.
And Ella, I mean, that connects really well with some of the things, I mean, Tony, I'm looking up at you, that we talk about in the exhibit is that women were facing those kind of challenges in the past too, and whether or not the stage was an appropriate space and whether they felt like they were safe there and that it was more acceptable to travel in a family band than to travel as a solo singer or in a band where they weren't your family, and the assumptions that were being made. So a lot of that connects with the past. It's unfortunate that it's still connecting with the present. And there's a lot more work to be done so that it's not part of our future, but thank you. But one of the things that you said, Emily, that I think is important is because you were talking about the school system and the connections that you were making there, because you're both a musician and you've had a very firm foot in the education side of things. And I think that's another one of those positives that we can talk about when you're talking about being a musician and someone who's sharing music. And I just love to hear a little bit about, you've been sharing that traditional music with young people. You've been celebrating that Appalachian culture and music so that they can feel proud of where they're from. Because it's sometimes really hard in Appalachia to feel proud because there's so many stereotypes and so many ways that it's talked about. So I'd really love to hear a little bit more about why you think that's important and the kind of impact you think that has on young people.
I don't think you can even begin to underestimate how much music changes people's lives for the better. And I have seen it so many times through the years where it totally changed these students' lives. And it became a part of their life and their identity to play music, to make instruments. It made them proud of themselves and who they were. It made them connect with their families more into the past. I mean, and it just made them feel like, I know it was kind of like us, you had a sense of belonging. The kids have a sense of belonging is when they're a part of something like the music. It's just a big part of their lives. And it just builds people up. I can't even tell you how many people have gone on to do things that you would never have thought about them doing. And I don't believe they might have if it hadn't been for music making them feel better about themselves. I mean, I can think of examples. Yes. But it's something they'll always carry with them. And, it's like I tell them, it's something you can do when you're old. You can do it with other people and you'll always have somewhere to belong when you play music, especially we're so blessed in this region because there is so much music. There is something to do every single day and every single night till it's just about overwhelming sometimes, but there's always a place for it. And they're carrying on something that's really important for all of us. And I think everybody agrees on that for sure. Sure.
Well, and I think all four of you are connecting in different ways through educational initiatives. And so each of you have those little sort of roots and branches going out, which is wonderful. So my next question, again, sort of now that we sort of talked about where you've been and sort of the challenges and the ups and downs, what do you envision for your work as you move into the future? What do you aspire to next?
I don't think I thought about this one in advance. Yeah, I want to keep making music, obviously, and keep performing and traveling as I'm able. The project that's very important to me, I have two projects that are really important right now, is continuing my Appalachian Flatfooting and Clogging Academy, which I have students from all over the world now. And we meet virtually, and I have a series of videos, and I really have been able to connect in a much deeper way than I ever anticipated, even though it's online, with people sharing this beautiful dance form in a way that's very accessible to people of different abilities. So that's really important to me. And then I'm involved with another project called Cornbread and Tortillas. And I can talk more about that later, but it's a bilingual theater project with Appalachian music and dance and stories, and the same from Latin America and South America and English and Spanish. And it's kind of helping usher in the new era of Appalachian, of Kentucky, and all, and throughout the South, throughout the world, you know, just really living up to that idea of diversity and multiculturalism that we have in the United States, and taking full advantage of it and celebrating all the people that we have here. So.
I just want to be able to keep on doing what I'm doing right now, which is teaching music and playing music. I'm getting old, but I'm still hanging in there, and I want to keep getting better at what I do and reaching more people and trying to do the best I can to make people's lives better.
I want to be on the Grand Ole Opry and be like some weird, like postmodern Minnie Pearl kind of thing, and keep playing as much as I can. And I'd like to put out more records, which is something I'm realizing that I have the capability to do. And so I want to try to do that as much as possible. And just exploring songwriting and making music and getting deeper into being good at music. I also, Ernest Tubb is like one of my big heroes. And I think it's because the way he supported other artists, and artists that know me know that I love recommending people for gigs and making them EPKs and promo packets. I love taking pictures of other artists. So I love doing that. And I think being here at the radio is a really cool thing, because I kind of have like a platform to be able to do that and write blogs about people and sort of help others envision how to get booked, which I'm not sure what the magic sauce is. With my other thing, there has been people that said that I was doing bad stuff to get gigs, which is not true. I wasn't doing that stuff, which we were talking about earlier. But yeah, I'd like to help other artists kind of envision their EPK or whatever you want to call it in their branding, to be able to, because the internet's so different now, and tons of people can have ways to book. And I think supporting other artists is something I'm just really passionate about. And I know other artists aren't always that way, because I've had people bite me in the back and, all those things that happen. But I believe life isn't a competition, it's an exhibition. And that was one of the reasons why I started playing music, was believing that everybody has something like real special to share. And I love that about art. So that's another thing. And to wrap it up, sorry but I'm really excited about Farm and Fun Time and the work that we've done here at the museum. And Farm and Fun Time's a historical radio program that's been revamped for Radio Bristol and for the museum. And it's getting ready to be, I guess, nationally syndicated. And I do stage management for that program. And I've been on a major learning curve with that. And I'm excited for this region to really be highlighted as the birthplace of country music, and for people nationally to know that. I think that's a really powerful thing, and what, this part of what this museum is about. So yeah, I'm just excited to grow and expand and work with those programs. Yeah.
What I envision for the future is just more and more creativity. You hear cleanliness is next to godliness. To me, creativity is next to godliness. And my husband and I married later in life. He already had a 100+ acre farm. And when he proposed to me, he said, "I want to build a nest for your creativity." And I cried. And then I said yes. So now what we really need out there is a stern parent to tell us no, because he has as many ideas as I do. And when he said, "Let's get a sawmill and mill your wood for your banjos," I was like, "Sure." And so he did. And what I envision now is I'll tell you a secret. I won the award for Virginia Humanities Apprenticeship to teach others to build banjos. And they're doing, thanks. And they're doing something unique this year in that they actually have 3 people involved. So I'm teaching one to build, that one's teaching another to play. And then what I want to do is have that 3rd person that's learning to play to incorporate one of their children into helping us develop a kit for banjos. So we can get gourd banjos or mountain banjos, I haven't decided yet, out as kits for people. And so we'll have like 4 generations involved in this humanities program. So I'm really excited about that. And I think that's going to open up some things for the future. But it's a secret.
I want to do one of those apprenticeship programs one day. We have another apprentice up here in the back from Virginia Humanities. So Carla, yes, of course, Emily. Was it Lisa Ring? Yes. Yep. I thought I would remember that correctly, but I want to come back to what you were talking about earlier. You mentioned the cornbread and tortillas initiative that you work on, and that's a wonderful way to, sort of illustrate this idea that Appalachia wasn't just this one culture, that there were so many different cultures that come to play in this area. So I'd like you to tell us a little bit more, Carla, just about how that work connects with those different cultural communities and how you think that impacts the artists and the audiences.
Yeah, so it's one discussion to talk about like the historical roots of Appalachian culture, which is completely not monolithic, even though it was presented that way for so many years, so many roots going back. But with the cornbread and tortillas, we started about 8 years ago, and there's 7 of us. 4 members are from Eastern Kentucky, and 3 members are from different parts of Latin America and South America. Well, 3 Appalachia, 3 Latin South American, 1 Mexican American, excuse me. And she's our ballet folklorico dancer. She does all the percussive dance like I do, but the Mexican version of it. And so our purpose was a little different. And so rather than really exploring so much the roots, is more of like what's happening today in Kentucky and Appalachia, throughout the South, throughout the world. Because one thing that was really formative for me is that when I was a teenager, I went to the University of Kentucky, and which has a great Spanish program, and I really learned how to speak Spanish. Like I really wanted to not just take a few classes, to really become fluent. And when you become fluent in a language, it changes your identity. It changes who you are, and you start to interact with the people and cultures that are native speakers. And I realized what profound connections there were between traditional Appalachian culture and a lot of the different cultures that some of my friends were coming from. Their respect for the elders, the connection to the land, the sense of homesickness, even when you have to migrate for work, the centrality of like corn and food and beans, and the way that even though Christianity had sort of maybe been put into the mix, there was also these indigenous spirituality, like looking to the birds and the trees for spiritual signs and answers. And so we just kind of came together as a group and worked with a theater person, because only one of us was a theater person, and took our life stories and made little vignettes in English and Spanish. And we all have brought stories and songs and and some dancing from our different places that we come from. And what we find is that it definitely took off after the 2016 election. Hate crimes were on the rise, anti-immigrant sentiments were on the rise. And it seemed almost like a medicine for people who wanted an antidote to that kind of hateful rhetoric, that hateful, us and them kind of rhetoric. So it's a celebration, and it shows our shared humanity, our shared connection. And what I've noticed is that when we perform it for audiences from anywhere, whether it's in Appalachia or whether it's, Latinx audience members or people from, some other side of the globe, a different country, they always come up and say, oh, that reminds me of when my grandmother used to make, because we tell a lot of stories about food in the performance. And so there's so many ways to connect and enact social justice and fairness. And I think everybody up here really obviously cares deeply about that. And we're all doing it in different ways. And sometimes, we carry signs, sometimes we write to our legislators, sometimes we sing songs, sometimes we sit with the dying or at funerals, but sometimes we just throw a big party and have a bunch of food, sing a bunch of songs, dance, play music, and that changes hearts and minds too.
So I have a million other questions on my little cards, but we don't have time for all of them. So I'm going to end with one that's asking you all to give a piece of advice, what advice you would give to aspiring musicians or someone who wants to be in music for their passion and for their life and for their career, especially women who are just sort of thinking about it, starting at that point. What's like one little learning thing that you think you would love to pass on?
You gotta start. Oh, wow.
Take your time and love every bit of it. Just love every bit of it. Keep looking for the love in what you do, even the hardest things and the easiest things. Just take your time and love it.
Open mics, I think, are really important for people trying to get gigs. And it's really cool right now in Bristol because there's open mics every night of the week. And so that's a really cool thing. That being said, some places are only trying to pay people like $50 a gig, which don't undercut other artists, I guess, is another thing. Or try to be thoughtful about venues and other artists and how you're supporting your network of other songwriters, because I think that's important. But yeah, open mics, and don't let nobody stop you. Don't let them value you for like a piece of meat, like your size and your expiration date and how you look. And I think women get thrown into that way, way more than men. And I've had that happen to me again and again. And the truth is, it don't matter. The art matters way more than other people's judgment or their ideas about what you should be doing with your life or the way that you should do such and such. I think if you're a woman making art and it's coming from a genuine like space inside of you, inside of your psyche and spirit, that is going to speak forth way more than whatever other ideas society or other people tell you that you're supposed to do. Yeah, and open mics, and just go for it. Like, don't stop. I think, what is it? Some in motion stays in motion. Gigs begot gigs. So it's like, just keep doing stuff, even if it feels like you're throwing pasta at the wall and it never sticks and never done, but just keep doing stuff.
I'd say follow your path, follow your heart and your path, enjoy what you do, be kind, and always be caring of others.
I'd say don't listen to all the naysayers and all the people that tell you what's your backup plan and all the people that tell you can't make a living doing that. And value your time, charge an appropriate amount for your level of experience. And you probably need to be charging a little more than you think you are, than you think you should. And also just create your own story about what's possible. It is possible to make a living playing music. It can look a whole lot of different ways, but it is possible. And even though a lot of people will tell you it isn't, it is. So just don't listen to them and create your own path.
Yes.
Yeah.
So those are all great pieces of advice. And what you said at the end, Carla, especially about valuing yourself and not being sort of undercut by someone trying to pay you less than they should. That's another story that sort of runs through the special exhibit on women in old time music, with stories coming from seasoned musicians who are still finding themselves offered less than a male musician, for instance, or being assumed that they'll take less because they're the female act at the festival or something. So that's great advice. And I did say that was my last question, but I lied, because I really do want each of you to very quickly tell our audience how they can find out about what you're doing, just like if you have websites, and we will also include that when I send out the survey, I'll include that information, but just really quickly how to get hold of you. And I will say, Carla, I have seen your advertisement for the Appalachian clogging and flatfooting multiple times in my algorithm on Instagram. So.
CarlaGover.com, at Kentucky Carla on TikTok and Instagram. And I will have my email sign up open on my phone for anybody who wants to come up and sign up right now. I give you my granny's cornbread recipe, a free dance lesson, free songs, a herbal tincture video. It's like you get a care package when you sign up for my email list. So I really have a lot of fun with it, sending these emails. So be sure and sign up.
WhiteTopMountainBand.com, and we're also on Facebook under Emily Spencer, Martha Spencer, Kilby Spencer. That's for we'll advertise a lot of the places we're playing, and Allegheny Jam and the Ashe County Arts Council. Whoops.
Sorry.
Durr.
Instagram. Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Mama Molasses, MOMMAMOLASSES. And you can find me on the Facebooks. I'm all over the Facebooks. Ella Azalea is my personal Facebook. We can be friends. Also, yeah, just come say hey. Like anytime you see me, I'll try to look at my cell phone and tell you what my schedule is. But I do post it on the internet.
I'm on Facebook. If you just Google The Thang, everybody say that together. The Thang, not the thing or anything like that. It's The Thang, THANG. That's our September festival. It's an Appalachian String Band festival. And if you Google The Thang in Virginia, it's the only thing that's going to pop up. So that's the best way to find us. Or Sankofa, y'all, if you see, because Sankofa is that Ndinkra symbol that you see sometimes on West African garb of the bird looking back over its shoulder at a small egg. And there's no shame in looking back to get that precious thing you left behind. So that's what Sankofa is. And we all know what y'all is. So.
So that's going to be the end of our question session or our discussion. I know each of our guests are going to do a little bit of music or performance for us or demo for a few minutes. So we'll do that. And then we will get the chance to ask some questions from the audience. So get your thinking caps on, because I'm sure this has spurred a lot of thoughts. But first, yes, we'll move that. We'll move it out in front of you guys, but let us move the mic real quick, and then they're going to just share a little bit of music and dance with us. Well, thank you all for sharing some of your art with us, just a little bit. I wish we had time for way more, but I'm sure that there might be some questions in the audience. I don't know if we got any through Zoom, but first I'm going to open it up to people here with us in person. And if you have a question, let me know and I'll bring the mic to you. And if you guys can just share the mic when you answer, that'd be great. The mic that you will.
So I have a question for Dena. Any new instruments you're looking to experiment with or build in the future? Anything on the horizon?
Always. Someone contacted me the other day and wanted me to make, oh, I wish I could remember the name of it. It's an Asian instrument. It's got a gourd at the top and you play it against the body like a wah-wah pedal. What is the name of that? I can't remember, but I made it. And he sent me a recording the other day of him using it in performance because he wanted one with the wah-wah here, but a gourd body at the bottom. Usually it's just a stick. So I made that, and I'm open to try anything anybody's willing to play with and see what we come up with. As long as you make that non-refundable deposit, we can talk.
I wondered if Carla's online dance school came as a result of the pandemic, or had that been in process prior to?
Yes and yes. So I had always, for the past few years before the pandemic, I had been doing just a few like Zoom classes during the summer. But yeah, literally when every single source of work and income I had closed down overnight, I had already been thinking about building a digital course, and I had done some, I also have a master's degree in education. And so I had done some curriculum design and digital coursework as just randomly on a contract basis for PBS. And so I was like, I could do this. And it's really fulfilling. So that really is what galvanized it. And when I launched it for the first time, that's the first time I used hashtags on Instagram. I knew about hashtags, but I'd never really who bothers with hashtags. But I was like, I think I can get my content in front of some people that are interested in this, that I'm not paying for these ads. And I started doing that. And I did pay for some Facebook ads. And the first time I launched it, I had a 5-figure launch, which was like the most money I'd ever made in music doing anything at one time. And so I realized it was something that could, not only it's like totally from my heart. Like I love it so much and I love my students, but it like helps me not have to tour so hard and stuff. And plus you can't make money selling CDs anymore. So it's great. It's been really a blessing all around, but yes, thank you.
I guess I'm curious how each of you has adapted with technology, like you're talking about with your Zoom course, or how do you use your scientific background with crafting instruments? I'm just curious how you all adapt the future and the past in that way.
I think that to me, the science of sound is really fascinating. So I look for woods that will carry the vibration through the head the best. And with gourds, it's not how thick they are, it's how dense they are. So you can have an ever so thin gourd, but if it's dense, it's going to make a great sound. So I like playing with the different gourds to see what they're going to sound like. And there's always a moment in the studio when, like you're moving around and you've cut the neck and you started shaping it and you lay it down on the workbench a little too hard and it sings before you ever even put it together, before you ever even put strings on it. But that wood itself has its own, and it just makes you, if I had a tail, I'd wag it. It's just like, it just makes you feel so good. So I'm always looking at the science of what's happening.
The one thing I would say, I think I've spoken about adapting with technology and adapting to learn business skills when I wasn't an artist, but a story that really struck me, I think it was originally from Persia, and I'm not going to tell the whole story, but basically the very, very, very Cliff Notes version is just this woman who is born into a family of rope makers, and then all of her family dies and she has a misfortune and winds up with this other family, and they make poles. And then she goes on an ocean voyage with them and the boat sinks. And then she winds up with this other family that makes silk cloth. And so she learns all these trades, and it seems really random. And then at some point, I don't remember the exact story, but it doesn't really matter. She winds up inventing the tent with the silk and the poles and the rope. And through that, invention gains great fortune and fame and like this beautiful life. And to me, it's such a beautiful metaphor for we go through life collecting these skills, and sometimes they seem really random, but I think if we're paying attention and if we're really trying to be in alignment with what our purpose is on earth, we find that all these seemingly random things that we've collected over our lives can be put together in a bigger, more beautiful way to help us amplify what we were here to do. So that's what I live by.
Any other questions? Oh, Tony has one.
Well, first of all, thank you all so much for being here. This has been a really exciting conversation and so many interesting insights from each one of you. I'm just wondering what other career paths so you all are very like performance heavy as far as your career paths. And of course, you've got luthier and we have dancing and all these other things. But if anyone's out here listening to this conversation, what other career paths or advice would you give to women who are interested in getting into the music industry? I mean, I'm just wondering your take on that, because there's so many other avenues. I feel like when people think of music, they kind of automatically think of performance, but what are the other kind of options for women to get excited and interested about this industry and this music in particular? Other than performance, yes.
I know right now there are a lot of scholarships available for women who are interested in being producers and engineers and working in the audio space. So that's one idea.
Of course, teaching is always out there. A lot of different ways.
Yeah, I'm in a lot of different ways, like the radio and stage work. And I went to the IBMA in 2019. I didn't actually play the IBMA. I was just at like one of the outside stages, but I met a DJ who also works on Radio Bristol, Brad Kalodner, but he was like, I've never met like a young lady doing radio. And I think more women should be doing radio and podcasts and things like that, and sharing the history that they find are just things that they think are cool. Obviously, I think songwriting is a big thing that people can get involved with. One of my good friends, who also is my manager that I talked about, we started touring together from like rural North Carolina, BFE, and like she made up a management company called Pondlands Management. And we just like would call people and be like, you need to book us at your venue, blah, blah, blah. But now they have a legit production company and do booking and management for artists. And I've been meeting more women who are doing artist management. And I think speaking with the email stuff, and this is like a broad umbrella thing, so sorry, but pre-apologize, but I think the way that women look at things a lot of times is less linear and more about connection and inclusive and more holistic. So when you have women that are bookers in music, you have women working with each other who are supporting each other. It's less, not that it's still not business, it is, but it's less the point A to point B and more about creating art and creating space for people to do things. And I think the music community needs way more of that. That's more art focused. And yeah, so I'd like to see more women doing management and booking and all of those things.
Yeah, and along with that, running your own festivals.
Yeah.
You know, because like we have the thing, the Jug Band Festival in Louisville is run by a woman. There's so many ways that you can do that. One other way I think is musicology, and not for the sake of education, but we need archivists. as we're starting to find these stories, these hidden stories that, well, people didn't know a lot of things about the banjo before Dena Epstein did her work. And it just turned the whole banjo world on its head. And I think, not to sound like I'm stereotyping or anything, but the persistence and the resilience that women develop living in this culture puts them in a prime position for being musicologists and archivists, and the ones who hold our stories and keep our stories dear and spread those stories around, not just in an education way, but just by making things available. Jobs at the Smithsonian are, there are jobs at the Smithsonian for people who are interested in doing this kind of work, and other institutions as well.
So I'm going to say that we did not prompt our panel to answer some of these questions the way they did, but a lot of what they've talked about are, again, they're connecting to things in the exhibit. We had the Real World String Band talking about how in the we had the Real World String Band talking about woman-led producers and women-led festivals and bookers, and how much that made a difference to women having more gender parity on stage. We had them talk, we had other artists that we talked to having those conversations with us. So I think it's great that you all are sort of, and without prompting, doing those things. And the other thing that we talk about in the exhibit is cultural memory keepers, the women who in those early days weren't performing, they were at home, but they were keeping those memories, that the early archivists who weren't being paid for that work, but that's what they were doing. So I think that's wonderful that you all said that. And I'm just going to say, you can also work in a museum. You mentioned the Smithsonian, but you can also work in a museum if you are interested in music and other things. So any other questions before we end for the evening? That was a great question, I think. Well, wait just a second. Yes. You might not, but Zoom does.
Anyway, question about the banjo. You said it came into the Caribbean. Did it come there to the South, the slave? And I think they called it the banjo, didn't they?
Yeah, if you follow the transatlantic slave trade, you see the bones of the story of the banjo. There were accountings and instruments like this that came over on some of the slave ships. There were instruments in the Caribbean being developed by the Portuguese that, they think that maybe that's where that drop string came from. There's my mentor who taught me to build the banjo and now lives in Jamaica and is deeply studying all of that information. And then it all ended up in North America to be modified from the gourd banjo into the banjo we see now out of Baltimore. Yeah.
Yeah. And that assumption, I think that you mentioned this earlier, Dena, that it's an American instrument, that it started here, but it had this amazing journey that's tied into our history and so many other things. But if you're interested, for those of you who do want to know more about the banjo, we did have Christina Gaddy here in January as one of our speaker series, and that is on our website, the video of her talk about her book, Well of Souls, that just came out in the last year. So that's a great book for learning a bit more about that history. Well, I think we've come to the end of our discussion. Unfortunately, I think we could keep going for quite a bit longer, but First, I want to say such a big thank you to all of the women that have been here with us tonight. They have done an extraordinary job. Now that you know them, please don't forget them, support them, and hopefully we'll have them back here again. I'm already thinking of things that we can do with the four of you again. So that's wonderful. And then, of course, another really big thank you to our audience, both here and on Zoom. Again, you all showing up for these types of programs are what make this museum live and breathe, and we really appreciate that. If you love us, feel free to leave a donation on your way out. I will say one thing before we say goodnight, and that is that there are the museum has constant programming. Like I said earlier, it's almost all free and low cost. And we have some really cool stuff coming up. If, like I said, if you didn't get a chance to see the I've Endured Women in Old Time Music exhibit beforehand, or you haven't been here yet, it's here through December 31st. So you've got plenty of time to come visit it. But a lot of the stuff that they talked about intersects so well with that exhibit. And I think you'll really enjoy it. And then we have a few things also connected to that exhibit coming up this week on Thursday at 12 noon on Radio Bristol Book Club. We will be talking on air about the book Catherine Jackson French, Kentucky's Lost Ballad Hunter, about one of those early archivists of ballad songs who didn't get her work published for over 100 years due to a whole slew of different issues, one of which was because she was a woman, and it has been recently published. But we will also be talking to the author of her biography, Elizabeth D. Savino. And then we have Mama Molasses with us on Friday, June the 2nd at 10:30 a.m. for our monthly story time, where we will be doing a little book about Jean Ritchie, and Mama Molasses will be singing a song with the kiddos and the tiny tots and coloring and activity sheets. So lots of fun for little ones. And then our next speaker sessions is on Tuesday, June 13th at 7 p.m. That will be with journalist and author Holly Gleason from Nashville, who will be talking to us about country music's women. So we have a lot of programming coming up. And actually one other thing on Saturday, June 10th at 9 a.m., if you've decided you think we're the coolest thing you've ever seen in your life, come volunteer, and you can learn how to be a museum volunteer on June 10th at 9 a.m. So there's lots of ways to connect with us, but most of all, just thank you for being here and have a great evening.